The Puyallup people and the Puyallup Nation are salmon people. We have a creation story that in the beginning, Creator blew life into us, and at the same time He blew life into our other half, and the other half is the salmon nation. And we have a sacred promise there that in order for the salmon to return and nourish us, we have to honor and protect them by returning their bones and protect them. A threat to the salmon is a threat to our way of life.
When our fishermen go out on our river, it's not the same good spirit that they used to have. We have stories of zombie fish. They call them zombie salmon or zombie fish. And I remember the first story my brother ever told me about them. They were fishing and it was late at night and something got caught on their net and they couldn't get it off. And he goes and he shines the flashlight on it and it's a fish. It's alive, it's swimming, it's moving, trying to get out of the net. But the only meat on the fish is on its head. The rest of it was just like a skeleton. It was eaten away, there was chunks of it off, and it looked like it should have not been alive. But the only part of it was its head. And he was so freaked out that he didn't even want to fish in the river anymore. Those are just some effects that we still deal with today. They're not only getting smaller, they're not only depleting, but they're also changing. They're also not edible anymore. All of this pollution,
And being in the sacrifice zone of the LNG facility, I mean, you look at international standards and it's not supposed to be within, how many miles is it?
3 miles.
3 miles is international standards, and I live within a quarter mile of the LNG facility, within a quarter mile, where I've grown up 30 years. There's a creek in front of our house that was alive at one time, and it's completely dead. I mean, that's how close we live to the port. I mean, we get to see the pollution firsthand. I mean, there's nothing in between my house and the port. It's a buffer zone. It's called a buffer zone, and there's a street, a creek, and then here's the port. And every year the port edges in closer and closer on this buffer zone that was supposed to keep us protected.
When the e-waste fire happened, just a few blocks away from the Northwest Detention Center, I talked to a friend of mine later who told me that all they were told was that yard time was canceled, but no one knew why. And my friend thought that maybe the building was on fire, because his feeling was that folks were going to be kept into their cells. Well, yeah, I mean, they could see the smoke. They could smell it, they could see it. People with asthma were having trouble breathing, but were not able to, access any sort of medical resources. And they don't know why. And so fundamentally for us, the concern is we're not convinced that agencies like ICE and private companies like GEO are really thinking about what a joint emergency response looks like. In the case of a residential facility that is located in an area that is not zoned residential. If this LNG plant were proposed in a residential neighborhood, it would never get permitted. Like it or not, the Northwest Detention Center makes that a residential space. Those are people, they live there. If it's not safe for your neighborhood, it's not safe for theirs.
The work that it takes to build pipelines, to frack gas, that takes a lot of bodies, a lot of staff. So the man camps that are being built along those routes and along those pipeline routes, those are transient workers who often don't have any social or familial ties. And some man camps have over 20,000 people living within them. So these are mostly men, transient workers who are isolated. They work up to 16-hour days. So there's increase in violent crimes, rape, in human trafficking, prostitution, and substance abuse.
In Canada, many of the workers who are being brought into the labor camps that are called man camps globally, they're brought in on temporary worker visas. They're predominantly Filipino. They are intentionally segregated, and they are brought in only as men so that they can be like brazos, so that they can be human bodies who do work, but not hearts and brains and families, and that is intentional. And those of you who know, the history of how we do labor segregation in the U.S., we know that we've done this to Chinese railroad workers. We know that we've done this to Mexican bracero workers. We know that we also do this to H-2A, H-2B visa workers here in the U.S. It's also happening further up north in the pipeline. And so what we see is settlers of color who are being pitted against indigenous peoples on their own land. Right, and so I really wanted to highlight the ways in which this violence that is happening between different communities is something that is intentional, it's long-term, it's long-standing,